Italy, 1904. In the rural, beating heart of Tuscany, where the hills seemed to breathe ancient stories and World War II was still a tangible memory, life near the city of Arezzo followed its own rhythm, dictated by the sun and seasons. There, in the even more isolated village of Cennina, nestled like a secret among the woods, lived Rosa Lotti Dainelli. At 40, she was a farm woman of simple life, her face marked by timid labor, a devoted mother of four. Her home, the modest farmstead La Collina, was a bastion of rustic tranquility, almost untouched by the rapid modernities beginning to transform the country. Electricity, for instance, was a distant promise whispered among neighbors. The morning of November 1st, All Saints' Day, dawned cold and damp. The sharp scent of earth, soaked by the previous night's heavy rain, hanging in the still air. As was her custom on holy days, Rosa rose before dawn. She tended to her family, prepared breakfast, and hurried out, her heart light with devotion. Her mission was twofold. First, to honor her ancestors at the local cemetery with a bouquet of fresh chrysanthemums. Second, to help with preparations at the small village church, a task she embraced with quiet pride. She couldn't have imagined that this routine journey under the gray Tuscan sky would lead her beyond the limits of her known world, straight into the epicenter of the inexplicable. Normality was about to be irrevocably shattered. The path to her destinations was a familiar trail, snaking through the dense woods that hugged her farm. The night's rain, however, had turned the passage into a trap of thick, sticky mud. Concerned about protecting her best shoes and stockings, saved for the occasion, Rosa made a practical decision. She carefully removed them, holding them along with the flowers. She continued barefoot, feeling the direct cold ooze of the mud between her toes, a common sensation, yet one that seemed to foretell something different that day. The silence of the forest was profound, broken only by her cautious steps and the dripping of water from the sodden leaves. It was upon emerging into a clearing, bathed in the pale morning light, that something entirely out of place caught her eye. A structure, large, metallic, resting silently on the wet grass with an impossible presence. It had the bizarre shape of two wide cones joined at their bases, perhaps about 8 feet tall in total. Its smooth brownish surface emitting an unusual metallic sheen, almost golden, even in the diffuse light. The most disturbing aspect was the absolute silence surrounding it. No vibration, no engine hum, nothing. Rosa's mind scrambled for a plausible explanation, clinging to the news that the electric company was starting work in the area. Could it be some new unknown piece of equipment? The rational idea seemed feasible for a fleeting moment, but the object's alien shape and spectral stillness defied this reasoning. Curiosity, mixed with a subtle shiver of foreboding, became irresistible. She had to see it closer. She advanced slowly, her heart beginning to pound against her ribs, each step in the mud seeming to echo in the tense silence. A few yards away, the strangeness only intensified. She saw a small circular opening, like a hatch, slightly ajar on the side of the lower cone. Hesitating for a moment, she then peeked inside. The interior was a shock. 2 small, functional-looking chairs, and in front of them, a panel that glowed with an intense, self-emitted white light. She looked around frantically. No sign of workers, no other footprints in the mud but her own. She was completely alone with this silent, impossible thing. Reality began to fray at the edges. It was then that a subtle sound, a snapping of dry twigs coming from the dense nearby undergrowth, made her jump. A wild animal, her body tensed, ready to retreat. But what emerged from the shadows belonged neither to the Tuscan fauna nor to any fauna she could conceive of. Two figures, surprisingly small, barely exceeding 3 feet in height, but undeniably humanoid in their basic structure. They walked with unexpected agility over the uneven ground. The real shock came when she focused on their faces. They were almost human, yet terribly wrong. Their skin was covered in a web of fine, deep wrinkles, giving them an appearance of extreme old age that contrasted bizarrely with their diminutive stature. And the smile. That smile was the image that would forever be seared into her memory. Fixed, constant, unchanging, stretching their thin lips in an expression that conveyed no recognizable emotion. Neither joy nor mockery, just a constant, profoundly unsettling presence. There was no warmth or life in the eyes that should have accompanied such an expression. They wore one-piece, tight-fitting suits of an indefinite color between gray and blue, which seemed to absorb the light. Small, short capes adorned their backs, and their heads were covered by smooth, close-fitting helmets without visors that looked like an integral part of the suit. The impact was overwhelming. Rosa felt her blood run cold, her muscles stiffen. She stood there, rooted in the mud, unable to scream, unable to move, her wide eyes fixed on these apparitions. The flowers and shoes slipped from her numb fingers, falling silently onto the wet ground. They weren't children. They weren't old people. They weren't demons from the legends, although that was the only analogy her terrified mind could grasp. They were something else entirely, something utterly alien, and they were approaching her, their small feet moving with silent purpose. They stopped a few steps from Rosa, their fixed, impenetrable smiles seeming to scrutinize her. There was no apparent hostility in their posture, but their very strangeness was a form of aggression against normality. The air seemed to vibrate slightly around them. Then, with precise and unexpectedly delicate gestures, one of them bent down and picked up Rosa's woolen stockings. The other collected the shoes. She had a spasm of reaction, instinctively trying to reclaim her belongings. But upon briefly touching the hand of one, she felt a contained strength, a firm yet non-violent resistance that made her recoil. As they examined the simple objects with an intensity that seemed almost scientific, they began to produce sounds. It wasn't human speech. It was short clicks, guttural sounds, a rhythmic cadence, but utterly devoid of meaning to her. Were they conversing with each other in that impossible language, or trying to address her? The barrier was absolute, frustrating. Rosa's initial fear began to mix with profound confusion. Why the interest in her old things? She tried again to grab her shoes, extending a hesitant hand. This time, they held them more firmly, and she realized, with a chill, the disproportionate strength contained within those small bodies. They then turned in unison and walked back to the conical machine. They deposited the shoes and stockings inside the open hatch with an almost reverent care. Rosa watched, paralyzed by the bizarre scene. They returned almost immediately, but now they carried something different. One of them extended toward Rosa a spherical object about the size of a large orange. It was wrapped in a dark material with a texture resembling wrinkled leather, but which looked strangely organic and felt cold to the eye. The offer was clear, but its purpose was a total mystery. An exchange? A symbolic gift? A test? The sight of the sphere, as alien as its bearers, filled Rosa with a sudden wave of revulsion and dread. She recoiled instinctively, babbling disconnected words about wanting her things back, her voice choked with fear. The beings just watched her, the sphere still extended, their smiling faces expressionless. The impossibility of communication, the utter strangeness of the situation finally broke her paralysis. Panic flooded her. She needed to get out of there, now. The instinct for self-preservation, a force older than reason, took control. With a stifled cry that barely escaped her lips, Rosa turned and ran. She ran as if her life depended on it, and perhaps it did. She plunged into the protection of the woods, stumbling over hidden roots, mud splashing on her clothes, branches scratching her skin, the sound of her own ragged breathing and pounding heart filling her ears. She didn't dare look back until she felt she was at a safe distance, hidden behind the wide trunk of an old chestnut tree. Chest heaving, she risked a glance. The two beings hadn't followed her. They were standing near the machine, now examining the bouquet of chrysanthemums she had dropped with the same intense, disconcerting curiosity. The scene was surreal. These otherworldly creatures, fascinated by simple earthly flowers. She watched, holding her breath, as they picked up the flowers and also the mysterious sphere, carrying everything inside the conical structure. One after the other, they disappeared through the hatch. The door closed with a soft, almost inaudible click, sealing the object. For an instant, everything was still again in the silent clearing. Then, without warning, without sound, without any disturbance in the air, the machine began to lift off the ground. It floated gently a few feet above the mud, hovering with an impossible lightness, defying all known laws. Then, with a sudden, silent, and dizzying acceleration, it shot vertically upward. It rose beyond the tallest treetops in the blink of an eye and vanished against the pale morning sky as if it had never been there. Only the silence returned, now heavier, denser. And on the clearing floor, the only physical proof of the impossible visit, a small circular hole in the mud where the object's base had rested. Rosa remained there, trembling, the morning chill mixing with the chill of fear, trying to process the trauma and terrifying wonder of what she had just witnessed. The shock gave way to a visceral need to seek safety, to find familiar ground amidst the madness. The church. That was where she needed to go. She burst out of the woods, running down the trail, now indifferent to the cold, the mud, the decorum. She arrived at the small village church in a sorry state. Barefoot, clothes muddied, hair disheveled, terror stark in her wide eyes. Her friends, already beginning the preparations for the holy day, rushed towards her, alarmed. Between sobs and broken sentences, Rosa tried to explain the inexplicable. But how to put into words the sight of the smiling beings, the flying machine, the strange force, the mysterious sphere? In her mental universe, shaped by Catholic faith and rural isolation, There was only one possible category to fit such an aberration: the supernatural. They were demons, evil spirits that had accosted her in the woods. That was the version she told, the only one that made any sense in her terrified world. Her friends, and later the priest, listened to the story with astonishment and concern. But such an extraordinary account, coming from a woman known for her seriousness and devotion, could not be contained. The news leaked out, first as a whispered rumor in the village, then gaining momentum and reaching the ears of the local and regional press. Italian newspapers soon ran headlines about the peasant woman of Arezzo and her encounter with demonic beings, or smiling ghosts. Story became a local sensation, attracting curiosity seekers and the first investigators to the site. The confirmation of the circular mark in the ground lent a veneer of physical credibility to Rosa's already astounding narrative. Her story, born of genuine fear and interpreted through the lens of her culture, began its long journey to become one of the most emblematic and debated cases in global ufology, a field of study she didn't even dream existed yet. Rosa herself, however, would remain oblivious to this classification for a long time. Crucially, Rosa Dainelli's terrifying experience was not an isolated event on that fateful morning of November 1st, 1954. While she confronted her bizarre encounter in the secluded woodland clearing, the skies over the Arezzo region seemed to simmer with anomalous activity. As Rosa's story gained notoriety, other witnesses began to emerge, reporting their own strange observations, occurring in different locations, but at very close times, and in the same general area. These were ordinary people, unconnected to each other or to Rosa, whose routines were briefly interrupted by glimpses of the inexplicable, forming a chorus of strangeness. A farm worker, hunting nearby, reported seeing an unidentified luminous body descend from the sky and then ascend again in the area of Rosa's encounter around 6:30 a.m. At almost the same time, a florist and her son, driving on a local road, observed a peculiar object, a reddish, shiny, conical device, about 7 feet tall, ascending rapidly and leaving a curious trail of spiraling blue smoke. A young stonemason described seeing what he called a brilliant rocket shooting vertically upwards at high speed. Later, around 7 a.m., other citizens going about their morning routines also reported strange flying things. Perhaps the most detailed account, aside from Rosa's, came from a mechanic riding his motorcycle. He was startled by a flying sphere moving horizontally, low over the ground, emanating such intense light from 3 beams, 1 central, 2 lateral, that it illuminated the landscape, leaving a red and blue trail. His cry of alarm attracted the attention of 2 other residents, who confirmed seeing a reddish, egg-shaped object moving away quickly. These reports, largely made before the details of Rosa's experience were widely known, and without the witnesses using terms like UFO or alien, paint a fascinating picture. They suggest that something much more complex and perhaps coordinated was occurring over Tuscany that morning, an event that touched the lives of several people, but which had, in Rosa Dainelli, its closest and most traumatized witness. More than half a century has passed. the world has changed in ways the Rosa of 1950 could hardly have imagined. Ufology evolved from fantastic tales into a serious field of investigation, and the Cennina case has been re-examined countless times. Rosa Lotti Dainelli's story transcended local folklore to become a pillar in the study of close encounters of the third kind. Yet, despite all the analysis, the fundamental questions echo with the same disturbing force. Who were those diminutive beings with ancient faces and frozen smiles? Where did they come from? What was their purpose in that remote Tuscan woods? Why the fascination with such mundane objects as shoes, stockings, and flowers? And what was the meaning of the offered sphere, a gift, a sample, a tool, a weapon? The smile in particular remains a powerful symbol of the encounter's radical otherness, defying our interpretations of emotion and communication. Rosa Dainelli lived to the age of not passing away in 2006. Throughout her long life, she faced scrutiny, skepticism, and relentless curiosity. She repeated her story countless times to researchers, journalists, and the curious. But her core narrative never wavered, never contradicted itself in essential details. She maintained with a quiet, unshakable conviction that every moment of that terrifying experience was absolutely real. The psychological impact of that encounter shaped her perception of reality forever. She had no final answers, but she carried the certainty of what she had seen and felt. The encounter in the Tuscan woods remains a window into the vast unknown, a reminder that reality may hold more mysteries than our philosophies or sciences can currently explain. The enigma of the smiling beings continues to challenge us, an indelible and profoundly human chapter in the annals of the unexplained. What do you think Rosa Dainelli encountered in those woods? Were they interplanetary travelers, dimensional beings, or something else entirely? What's your theory about the smile and the sphere? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. We want to know what you think about this intriguing case. If you're fascinated by mysteries like this and want to explore other cases of unexplained encounters and evidence of the UFO phenomenon, be sure to subscribe to the Alien Cases channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our investigations, and share this video with other enthusiasts of the unknown.